They laughed at my podcast. Now I read their text to 7 million listeners. That's how I start every keynote now. It gets a laugh, sometimes a gasp, sometimes both. But when I first said those words out loud, I was sitting alone in a coat closet with a USB mic duct taped to a shelf, my laptop on a wobbly stack of shoeboxes. No lights, no applause. Just a man, a microphone, and the echo of every time someone told him he wasn't enough. My name is Jonah Price, and I wasn't supposed to matter. I grew up in a house where your worth was measured in achievements, and silence was mistaken for weakness. My dad, a retired Navy pilot, believed in discipline and results. My mom was a school principal who carried the stress of 3 decades on her shoulders like armor. And then there were my siblings, Troy, the golden boy real estate tycoon, and Amanda, the violin virtuoso turned music therapist who made NPR cry once. Me? I was the quiet one, the listener, the kid who stayed in his room and recorded cassette tapes of himself reading old newspapers out loud, not because anyone asked, but because the sound of my own voice helped me feel real. When college came, I chose communications. It felt like the closest thing to storytelling. Everyone called it a cop-out major. Dad said, "You might as well major in whispering." Amanda laughed. Troy didn't say anything. He just patted my shoulder like I'd announced I was pursuing mine. But I believed in the power of voice, of story, of giving breath to the things people try to bury. After college, while my siblings made headlines and down payments, I was working part-time at a community radio station in Allentown, reading weather updates and hosting an hour-long slot no one listened to called After Midnight. I spent my nights editing voice memos into episodes of something I called Sound Without Vision, a podcast about the unnoticed moments in everyday lives. 12 people listened, maybe 15. It didn't matter. It was mine, until the texts leaked. A cousin accidentally forwarded me screenshots from a group chat I didn't know existed. The family group chat. The real one. Troy, did you hear Jonah's latest episode? Guy interviewed a barista for 40 minutes about latte foam. Amanda, I swear he thinks he's hourglass. It's kind of adorable. Sad, but adorable. Dad, he's still doing that? I thought he was working for Amazon or something. Mom, let him play. At least he's not asking for money. The worst part? I wasn't surprised. Not really. Just hollowed out. Like something soft inside me finally caved. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just stopped recording. For almost a year, I ghosted my own passion. My mic gathered dust. My RSS feed died. I worked tech support at a call center and learned how to apologize to angry people in 5 languages. But one night, after helping an old man reset his modem for the 3rd time, he said, "You've got a nice voice. You should be on the radio." I laughed. "I tried," I said. No one listened. He replied, "Maybe you were saying the wrong thing." That night, I opened a blank project file and whispered into my dusty mic. They laughed at my podcast. It felt like fire. It felt like beginning again. And this time, I wasn't playing nice. "So you're still doing that little audio thing?" my aunt asked, spearing a slice of turkey like it had wronged her. Thanksgiving at my parents' house was a lot like performance theater. Every line rehearsed. Every gesture loaded. "It's called a podcast," I said, trying to sound neutral. "And yeah, I'm working on a new concept." Troy let out a breathy chuckle across the table. "Concept? Huh? Are you pitching it to Netflix or just your microwave this time?" Laughter. The kind that slices deeper the more it's disguised as love. Amanda reached over and poured me more wine, whispering under her breath, "They don't get it. Don't let them take your air." That was the thing with Amanda, she'd mock you in private, but perform support in public. Always aware of the optics. I left early that night, carrying a Tupperware of cold stuffing and a mind full of static. That was when the idea truly clicked. Make the mockery the message. What if the podcast started with their words? Their digs? Their sarcasm? What if the intro to every episode was me reading a text they sent, a voicemail they left, a comment they posted? Welcome to Dead Air. The name was a jab, really, at the silence they gave me, at the belief that nothing I said mattered. In radio, dead air is the worst sin. In my world, it was where I lived. Episode 1 started with Troy's microwave joke. Then I told the story of Mr. Jennings, a blind jazz musician I met at the laundromat who taught himself piano by memorizing album covers. Episode 2 opened with a voicemail from my mother. "Jonah, honey, it might be time to think about a real job." I followed it with the story of a woman who turned her grief journal into a nonprofit for suicide prevention. I recorded after midnight, edited at dawn, Posted every Wednesday. At first, nothing. Then a retweet. Then a Reddit thread. Then a message from a woman in Chicago. I haven't talked to my dad in 4 years. Your story about the musician made me want to pick up the phone. By episode 5, I had 2,000 followers. Then 20,000. Then a feature on a podcast discovery blog. People started calling it audio therapy with teeth. Sponsors reached out. Indie platforms wanted interviews. A minor celebrity DM'd me to say she binged every episode during a divorce. And still, not a word from my family. Until the night I got a voicemail from my dad. Just 6 words. We need to talk. Come home. I stared at the waveform on my screen. Hit record. Next time on Dead Air, we talk about ghosts. The ones who speak only when you're too loud to ignore. Fade to black. I wasn't whispering anymore. I was broadcasting. I pulled into my parents' driveway like a soldier returning to disputed territory. Headlights off, windows cracked, engine humming just enough to whisper, "You don't own me anymore." The house looked the same. Red shutters. White siding. Perfect lawn. It always felt like a stage set built to impress neighbors more than raise children. Inside, nothing had changed. My mother answered the door like she hadn't left me on red for 8 months. "Jonah, you look thinner. Are you eating well?" "I cook," I said. "I record. I manage." "Oh," she replied, and already I saw her calculating what parts of that sentence could fit into a Christmas card. Dinner was a tableau of tension. My father carving roast beef with the precision of a man who wished the meat had a voice to argue with, Amanda texting under the table, Troy swirling wine like he was auditioning for a GQ spread. "We've been meaning to talk," Dad said. That's when I knew this wasn't a family dinner. It was an intervention. "Jonah," he continued, "this podcast thing, it's gotten a little out of hand." Out of hand? You named names. You quoted family texts. You made private matters public. I laughed once, short and sharp. "You mean the text where you called my work sad?" Mom interjected. "We were just worried. You seemed lost. So instead of helping, you made fun of me?" Troy leaned forward. "Look, we all say things we don't mean sometimes. That doesn't mean you broadcast them to the world. I didn't say anything you didn't already post, send, or record. I just gave it a platform." Amanda looked up from her phone. Her voice was quiet. "Your last episode hurt, Jonah." "Yeah? So did the last 30 years. Silence. My father cleared his throat. "We want you to stop. We want you to take down the episodes with family content. You want to control the narrative again," I said. "But I'm not your PR project. I'm your son." Another silence, heavier this time. Finally, my mom reached for my hand. "Then what do you want, Jonah?" I looked at each of them. "I want you to listen. Not fix. Not spin. Just listen." And for once, they did. I walked out that night with my head high. No fights. No hugs. Just clarity. Next morning, I recorded episode 11 of Dead Air. It was called Static at the Dinner Table. It opened with my dad's voice saying, "You've named names." And then mine. Names of power. So does silence. We climbed to 1 million subscribers that week. And my family? They stopped texting. Which, ironically, only gave me more material. I didn't mean to become a symbol. That's the truth. But when your inbox is flooded with stories, real stories, about people surviving toxic families, workplaces that gaslight, relationships that diminish, something shifts. You start realizing that what you thought was personal shame was actually a shared script. It started with a teacher in Oregon. She wrote, "I play your podcast during creative writing class. We don't talk afterward. We just sit and let the silence be the conversation." Then a factory worker in Ohio, "Your dead air isn't dead at all. It's the only place I feel alive." A single dad in Manila. A woman in Norway. A soldier in Guam. Their words came like drumbeats, soft at first, then undeniable. By episode 15, I had a speaking invitation from a podcasting conference in Austin. "We'd love you to close out Saturday night. Do a live reading. Maybe share a news story." I said yes. The auditorium smelled like fresh carpet and nerves. I wore my only blazer and tried not to sweat through it. The MC introduced me as the voice of unapologetic truth. I stepped to the mic, paused, looked at the sea of faces, not judging, just waiting. Then I said, "They laughed at my podcast. So I built a stage out of their punchlines. Welcome to the show." The room cracked open. Laughter. Applause. I read from episode 7, the one about Elijah, the bus driver who wrote poems on transfers. Then I played an unreleased clip, a voicemail from my mom from 2 years ago. "Hi, Jonah. It's Mom. Just wondering if you're ever going to use that degree for something useful. I paused. This is what useful sounds like, I said. People stood, clapped, cried. Afterward, someone from NPR approached me. Would you consider syndication? We think Dead Air could anchor our Sunday lineup. That night, I sat in my hotel room and listened to a 10-minute voice note from a teenager in Kentucky. She said she didn't think her story mattered until she heard mine. She ended it with, "Thanks for turning the volume up on people like us." I hit record. Next week on Dead Air, we talk about applause. Not the kind that fills a theater, but the kind that fills the cracks they left in you. And for the first time in my life, the sound in my chest wasn't anxiety. It was resonance. The emails started slow. 1 or 2 a day. Then 20. Then hundreds. And not the good kind. Subject lines like, "You're exploiting your family. You're not a hero, you're a narcissist. Is this podcast just revenge porn with a mic?" At first, I shrugged them off. Internet backlash is part of success, right? But then came the article. A blogger with a large following, someone who used to retweet my episodes, published a think piece titled, "Dead Air and the Ethics of Airing Dirty Laundry." They quoted my father's voicemail, the microwave joke, my mother's texts. They called it emotional manipulation under the guise of empowerment. And just like that, the tone shifted. People who'd once cheered started questioning. Sponsors paused payments. One even asked if I'd consider re-recording early episodes with names bleeped. Listeners split into camps, those who called me brave, and those who called me cruel. I locked myself in my apartment, blinds drawn, phone off. Sat in the dark with my equipment, wondering if I'd become the villain in my own arc. Then Amanda showed up. She buzzed for 10 straight minutes until I opened the door. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just sat down across from me, her violin case at her feet like she might play a soundtrack to our confrontation. "Jonah," she said, "I came because I didn't want this to be another voicemail." I blinked. Another. I heard the latest episode, the one about applause, and I recognized the silence under your voice. That's the sound of someone who's scared he might be right, and still alone. I didn't speak. She leaned forward. "You told the truth. But truth without compassion can become its own kind of lie. So what do I do now?" I asked. Shut it down? Issue a statement? Start a podcast about cats? She laughed, not cruelly, but softly. "You do what you've always done. You tell the next story. But this time, you include yourself as a character, not just the narrator." That night, I sat at the mic. No intro music. No sponsor read. Just me. This is Dead Air. And this episode is about the danger of being heard before you've healed. It was raw. Confessional. I talked about the emails. The hate. The fear that maybe, just maybe, I'd become everything I swore I wasn't. But I also talked about Amanda's visit. And her words. Truth without compassion can become its own kind of lie. When the episode ended, I didn't upload it right away. I waited. Reread it. Then hit publish. Not because I wanted applause, but because I needed forgiveness, and not just from others. From myself. 3 weeks after I hit publish on my most personal episode, I found myself in a space I never thought I'd be again, my parents' living room. Not for a holiday, not for a funeral, just a Sunday lunch my mom asked for after hearing episode 20. "Just us," she'd said. "No drama. I promise." I brought pie, because I'm still that kid, the one who shows up trying to soften the air. The table was set with the good plates, the ones from the wedding registry they never used unless company was over. I guess I was company now. We made small talk. Roast chicken. New curtains. Amanda had a new teaching residency in New York. Troy was apparently dating a news anchor. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Jonah," he said, folding his napkin like he was cross-examining it. We listened. Not just the last one. All of them. Mom added, "Twice." I waited. "Some of it hurt," she said. "But some of it helped." I wasn't ready for tears in her voice. I wasn't ready for her to say, "We didn't know we were hurting you. We thought we were keeping you humble." I said nothing, because humility shouldn't feel like erasure. Dad leaned forward. "When I heard that story, the one about the vet who couldn't sleep without your podcast, I realized maybe your voice was your purpose all along." I laughed, but it came out cracked. "That's the one that almost got me dropped by 2 sponsors." He nodded. "Still worth telling." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was whole. Then Mom said, "Will you ever do an episode about us? About this?" I looked at her. Really looked. "You're already in every episode," I said. But maybe this is where I stop using your words without your permission. We ate the rest in peace. No tension, just forks and pie and decades of ache finally exhaled. That night, I sat in my studio, opened a new file, and titled it, The Mic Between Us. I said, this episode is about forgiveness. Not the kind that asks for applause, but the kind that sounds like a door opening. And this time, when I hit record, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just trying to speak truth without setting fire to the room. You'd think a podcast about pain would be exhausting to make. But what surprised me most? It was the silence afterward that drained me. Every time I published an episode, I felt hollowed out. Like I'd carved something from my chest and left it on the internet for strangers to dissect. And yet, every time, someone wrote back. A letter from a woman who hadn't spoken to her sister in 10 years. A voicemail from a father who hadn't known how to tell his son he loved him. A kid in Nebraska who said, I didn't think men were allowed to talk like that. The echoes were louder than the noise. Then came the email. Subject line, Classroom Project, Jonah Price. It was from Ms. Leslie, an English teacher in a public high school outside of Boston. She said she'd built an entire unit around dead air. Each student picked an episode and had to write their own monologue in response. Raw, unfiltered, and honest. Most of these kids have never spoken this way in their lives, she wrote. Some don't speak at all, but you cracked something open. Attached was a Google Drive folder titled Echoes. I clicked, and there they were. 17 voices. 17 stories. About absent fathers. Invisible grief. Closet doors. Friendship breakups. One girl read a letter to her future self. If you make it out of this town, remember the girl who didn't believe she ever would. I didn't sleep that night. I recorded instead. Episode 24. I called it Echoes That Don't Fade. I played clips, with permission, from the students. Let their words breathe. Let their truths stand on their own legs. No edits. No commentary. Just stories. And when it ended, I whispered, if you think your voice doesn't matter, listen again. That episode broke every record we had. By morning, it was trending on every platform. News outlets picked it up. One anchor said, this might be the most honest 29 minutes ever broadcast. And suddenly, I wasn't just a podcaster. I was a mirror. I was the space where people finally heard themselves. I still live in the same city. Same studio apartment. Same battered kettle that wheezes when it boils. Fame didn't change that. What did change was the knock on my door. Not metaphorically. I mean it. 3 knocks. Real ones. It was a Tuesday. I opened the door to find a teenager standing there. Hoodie. Shy. Holding a thumb drive like it was something sacred. You're Jonah, right? I nodded. He held out the drive. This is my story. I recorded it. My school counselor said maybe you'd play it. If not, that's okay. I took it. Didn't ask questions. Just said, thank you. That night, I listened. He talked about panic attacks that came like weather. A dad who left. A mom who worked 3 jobs. A little brother who only slept when Jonah sang to him through the wall. When it ended, I sat in the dark and cried. Then I hit record. This is dead air. And today, I'm not the one talking. I aired it uncut. No intro. No outro. Just him. It became the most shared episode in our history. But something more important happened. A month later, his school created a weekly story circle. A safe space. It spread to 4 other schools. Then 20. People began sending me drives. Not files, drives. Hand-delivered. Packaged. Labeled in Sharpie. Because sometimes, what you hold in your hand feels more real than what floats in the cloud. My podcast wasn't just a show anymore. It was a place. A shelter made of sound. At our 5-year anniversary live show, Amanda introduced me. She stepped up to the mic in front of a packed house and said, when my brother first started this podcast, we laughed. Now, we listen. Standing ovation. When I took the stage, I didn't start with a voicemail, or a joke, or a sting at the past. I started with this. My name is Jonah Price, and once upon a time, I sat in a closet and told stories to no one. Now, I speak to millions. But the truth? The number never mattered. Only the echo. I paused. And if you're sitting there wondering if anyone hears you, this episode is for you. The crowd went silent. And in that silence, I found the one thing I'd been searching for all along. A voice that stayed. 10 years later, my podcast room looks a lot different. The coat closet is gone, replaced by a studio with warm lighting, soundproof walls, and a library of handwritten letters from listeners, some framed, some folded, all sacred. The show's called something else now. Not Dead Air. That name was a chrysalis. The one I needed when I was breaking free. Now it's called Signal. Because that's what we are. Beacons. Fragments of light across distance. We don't always speak loud, but we speak real. And someone always hears. Amanda produces now. She says it's her way of apologizing every week. Her name rolls in the credits before mine. I like it that way. My dad called last month. He was crying. Said he played my episode on grief at a veterans center in Ohio. Said the room went silent. Then someone stood up and spoke for the first time in years. Mom sends me short texts now. Usually 3 words. Heard this one. Made me cry. Proud of you. And I still get the drives. Taped up. Handwritten. Sometimes from people who don't even own smartphones. We built a physical archive now, a museum of stories. Open once a month. Free to the public. Visitors walk in, put on headphones, and listen. No commentary. Just human truths. Last week, a young woman came up after a listening session. She looked nervous, said she didn't know what to say. So I smiled. Don't worry, I told her. Sometimes, silence says enough. She nodded, then reached into her bag, pulled out a drive, labeled in Sharpie, my first time speaking. And just like that, it began again. Not with applause, not with revenge, just with a voice. And the strength of the signal it carried.